Welcome back. A draft report into the electricity crisis in Soweto has been released. It takes a deep dive into ongoing issues plaguing the area. The final report will be released early next year. To tell us more about this is the co-compiler of the report, Claire Ceruti from the University of Johannesburg. Thank you so much for your time, Claire. And I'm quite fascinated in actually reading the full report. It's over 100 pages. But I want to start off with the first part of the report, where you speak about energy racism. What do you mean by energy racism, and how does this apply, especially in the context of the ongoing electricity crisis that we are seeing in Soweto?
Okay, so what we noticed from the research which was done during the course of 2021 with residents of Soweto is that even though everybody is affected by load shedding and by the electricity crisis, what we are seeing that people who live in townships are affected in special ways by the electricity crisis, and that there's actually what we consider to be active discrimination against township residents in the form of what Eskom calls load reduction. So where load reduction differs from the normal load shedding. Load shedding is done on a basis of a rotation of areas, that every area gets its chance to have load shedding, but load reduction is happening only in the townships, and it has been specifically defined by Eskom as a way of saving energy in those areas where people are considered to have where people are being considered to be using too much electricity. So it's as if saying that people in townships don't really deserve to use electricity. And it also seems to be being used almost as a form of collective punishment in those areas where a lot of people who are, for example, living in informal townships, informal settlements which don't have access to electricity, and who then connect themselves, then people in the whole area, including those who haven't bridged the electricity supply, have their electricity taken away whenever there's pressure.
Sure.
It's also having the effect.
Yes, I'm so sorry to interject, but I want to see if we can cover as much as possible. You also go on in the report to speak about how it's almost how Eskom is discriminating against townships, especially when they load reduct, because townships are one of the most that are load reducted, and it's not even other areas that have this term load reduction that's applied. We had the Human Rights Commission on the show about 2 months ago, and they said it's a violation of human rights to not have constant electricity supply, and where residents don't have the means to provide for themselves basic needs like water and electricity, government should step in.
Mm-hmm. And that is certainly one of the things that we have been finding, is that the way people described it was that without electricity, life stops. And that is a very real problem, that when the electricity goes out, it's not only, for example, people lose huge amounts of food, in households that are already under stress, supporting unemployed relatives, relying on social grants and so on. There are domestic systems in place to try and save money, such as bulk buying. In these situations where the electricity is always going off, people are not able to then use those devices to save money and to make their money stretch a bit further. It's also putting a huge extra pressure onto particularly women, who have to then go out of their way to find other ways to get the cooking done. We are seeing also that load reduction is especially happening at the times of day when people are either getting ready to go to work and to go to school, or getting ready to come home and trying to wash themselves and eat after a long day's work. So I think it very much is a violation of of human rights. It's actually saying to people that even though you live in a society where electricity is a reality, where it's a safer way of lighting and cooking and so on than the alternatives such as paraffin or gas, but saying to people that because you live in a township and because you live in a place that's near to other people who haven't been given access to electricity and who then make their own plan, that somehow you're a lesser human being. It's saying to those people in informal town settlements as well, that somehow they're lesser human beings than people in suburbs.
Yes, Claire, let's just quickly speak about the issue around how many are saying, well, if you're using electricity, it's a service and you should be paying for it. Did the report look into how possibly areas within townships, not just Soweto, but areas within townships that cannot afford this electricity and Eskom is basically punishing them? I actually think you did use the word Eskom must stop punishing people. What about the issue of you using a service but you're not paying for it? And this is often what we are seeing Eskom's response, especially around the electricity crisis in Soweto.
Well, I think we should remember two things before we look at that question. And the first thing is to remember that there was a promise in 1994 that basic services would be provided free. And if you look back in the archives, you will see the poster from the ANC that says free basic electricity for all. So really, if residents of Soweto are feeling like that is a right, and I must agree that it should be a right, then actually only the government is to blame for that. But secondly, also to remember that the prices charged to residences since the end of apartheid, as electricity was extended, but domestic electricity is much more expensive than the unit cost for large mines, for big businesses and so on. So when Eskom comes along and says that this is a service that we all have to pay for, we need to ask, why are ordinary people who don't have incomes through no fault of their own, people surviving on social grants, why are those people being expected to pay more than big business, for example? You know, and then finally, it's also an issue of health and safety, that when people don't have access to electricity, we end up using things such as paraffin and so on, which can lead to fires, cause huge problems you know, like breathing problems, which are all going to in turn put pressure on other social services, such as the health system and so on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So really, I think we really need to overturn that idea.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights into this report. I think it's going to be a good holiday read. That was Claire Ceruti from the University of Johannesburg Centre for Sociological Research and Practice.